My Leica M6 is probably my second favorite film camera behind the Mia 6, but mine needs to go to the shop. And shops these days, it seems like it takes somewhere between 3 to 6 months. And this is kind of the daily driver. This is what is always out for me. To not be able to take photos for 3 to 6 months would be a bit of a problem. Also, if you've been here for a while, you know that I like shooting 500T, which is a tungsten-based film. I definitely prefer the look using an 85B filter on it. I mean, theoretically, I could just use one of my SLRs like Minolta SRT 200, but A, I'd have to buy a new filter. But also, like, it's really hard to focus with that filter on because you're actually looking through the lens. So I need another rangefinder. And because I'm a nerd and I've come to really love the Leicas, I got another Leica. Now, before anybody starts trying to say, oh my gosh, you keep saying you're cheap, but then you own two Leicas. This is not an M. This is a Leica CL. This cost me about a tenth of what this thing did. But honestly, it's kind of amazing. And if anything, I'm using this thing wishing that I would have bought one of these things years ago. So real quick history on the CL here. The Leica CL was made in partnership with Minolta, which is kind of funny because I found a Minolta here too. They made first the CL starting in 1973, and then in like 1980, they rolled out with the CLE, which is like the slightly nicer version of it. You'll see both a Leica CL and a Minolta CL and CLEs. They're the same camera, they're just branded differently. And because I'm, I guess, a Leica fanboy, I had to get the Leica version. The CL does have an internal light meter, and they usually came coupled with either a 50 or a 40mm lens. I intentionally bought one with a broken light meter though, because I wanted to, A, buy something that was as cheap as possible, and B, that if I use this thing for 6 months and then I sell it, I didn't want to run the risk of having paid extra for a working light meter and then have it break and then I'd lose money. So I intentionally bought one with a non-working light meter so that I have nothing to lose. But now that I've shot 2 or 3 rolls through this camera, I've kind of come to love it. Comparatively, this is definitely, like, the M6 is definitely still better. But it's not 10 times better. Let's talk through this thing. Why do I like this camera? The first thing is the size. This is a lot smaller than my Leica M6. You can see here that it's definitely like good half an inch shorter. And then weighing them out without a lens on, this weighed 590 grams and this weighed like 310 grams or something like that. It weighs only a fair amount less, which is just really nice. Obviously having a lighter camera is helpful. I also just like the size of it. It just fits really nicely in your hand. It's really easy to carry. It definitely feels a little bit more compact. It just has that like really small, easy to like throw in a bag kind of a size. As I mentioned with price, I think I paid between $250 to $300, something like that. I would say that's definitely on the low end of what you can find. I shopped for a while, so I found a good deal. But you're probably going to spend less than $500 on one of these things, which again, you're not going to find an M6 for less than $2,000 unless it's a scam. Another thing I really like about this camera is I like the feel of the winder. Oops. So it just has this really smooth thing. It's interesting because the winder goes all the way around the corner. So it's a little bit more like 200 degrees or something that you have to move your thumb in order to get all the way around there. But it actually feels pretty easy just because the camera is so small. That's really easy to come all the way around the corner and use that. Plus mine has this little bit of thumb grip on there and it feels really nice. As you compare that to the M6, which only moves like to about that, it moves about 180 degrees. But whereas the M6 has like the little bit of the movie thumb piece here, this one is stationary. Just difference. Also, as much as like I love the sound of the M6, I do really like the sound of this camera. It just has more of a shutter sound than the M6 does. Like the M6 is just like so quiet and so unobtrusive, which is awesome. But sometimes you just kind of like, I don't know, comparing that to like the other Minolta, like it's not that, because that has it has a mirror moving in it, so there's a lot more sound going on, but it is a little bit more of a sound. And you can compare it. I'm just going to play the sound of an M6 real fast, just because my M6 is loaded, so I don't want to waste film. You can hear the sound. So yeah, it's just a very pleasing shutter sound. because the light meter is not working in this camera, it just makes it feel super simple. And so it's really nice just to have something that only has, like, you put the film in, pick your aperture, pick your shutter speed, that's all it does. It's really nice to have something so simple. And speaking of, I mean, it's an aperture, so that's on the lens, just like almost all manual cameras. And then the changing of the shutter speed is right here on your thumb, which is kind of nice. It actually feels really modern. Like any modern digital camera has a bunch of wheels on the top there, right next to the shutter. And so it feels really akin to those. And it's the same place that like I would adjust the shutter speed of the aperture on like my Canon R6s that are recording these. And so that feels really nice. And then the really awesome thing is, unlike the M6, which is intentionally a very clean viewfinder, you just don't see a whole lot inside of it. One thing that's super cool about this is that it actually has a shutter speed display across the top. And so as you move this, it tells you what your shutter speed is, ranging between bulb all the way up to 1/1000th of a second. I feel like I don't try to change the shutter speed on the M6 with the camera to my eye very often, just because I don't know exactly what it is. With a working meter and stuff, you can obviously get your exposure correctly, but you just don't necessarily know, you might not know where your settings are. Where it is really nice to just have this up to your eye and not have to, I am moving, oh, it's a 15th of a second, it's a 2/50th of a second. It's down to bulb, it's up to 1,000. Like, it's really easy to move. And then if you're wanting to change the ISO, it just has this little button here that you push in on that dial and you can twist it around. It's super easy. I also would say that the viewfinder is really nice and bright. I mean, it's a rangefinder. So as long as you can actually see through the patch, any rangefinder really made after like 1970 probably has a really good viewfinder. It looks awesome, and this definitely does. One last thing that I really love about this camera as compared to the M6 is the ease of the winder when you finish a roll. So you have to push a button on the bottom to release it, and then it's this big lever that flips out, and then you twist it, and it's actually big, and it's actually easy to twist, and it's like 10 seconds and the whole thing is wrapped up, as compared to the M6, which it like flips off in a corner, and it's a way smaller winder, and a lot of times it like slips out of my finger, and then the tension rewinds, and it's just like a little bit more difficult. But it's definitely not a perfect camera, and let's talk about a few things that I don't necessarily like. The first of those being the strap location. So I'm gonna put here and put a Peak Design strap just on it here. As you might be able to see, they're on the side. That's very different, isn't it? Yeah, I honestly have never seen it like that on a 35mm camera before. I'm sure it exists, just like none of the other 35mm cameras I have that have strap lugs have them on the side like that. It's fine. Like it's not that bad when the camera is here on your neck. If the camera is sitting like this, just aimed forward, it's actually not bad because it just comes up to your eye, it goes back down. Comes up to your eye, goes back down. Not a big deal, super comfortable. But the thing is, I actually usually wear my cameras around the shoulder like this, and so I pull the camera up, and then there's this really annoying thing because it like twists, and now this like plastic lug here, which is where the Peak Design connects, is sitting like right below the viewfinder, or sometimes it like is covering the viewfinder, and it just is like poking on my nose, and this is really like awkward and stuff. So I definitely I don't like that side thing. If you use a hand strap on it, it's not quite so bad, but for a neck strap, it's pretty awkward. Speaking of weird things about this camera, let's talk about loading it. If you do, it comes apart in two separate pieces. It's not a door, it just opens up all the way, which I guess the Leica M6 does that. The bottom door comes off, but it's not still attached, which I guess is probably a good thing that it's still attached, but it still is weird. And then I'm just gonna quickly load this here, and big surprise, I have a roll of 500T. It's a little bit interesting just because it loads upside down and it reels backwards. Every other camera I've ever used, when you wind that way, the wheel moves away from the film, like moving counterclockwise, whereas on this camera, it actually moves clockwise, so it's moving kind of like pulling it under. So all I have to do though is slide the little notch in, pull it across. I usually do a little bit of a twisty just to make sure things are moving correctly, which it is. Door goes down, and then, which I guess is kind of nice that this is connected, but then that would just slide down just like so, and I'd be able to wind it. I don't know if I dislike the way that it works like that, but I definitely don't like it. Honestly, I don't love loading Leicas in general. I think both this and the M6 is just weird. Another thing that is a little bit weird about this camera is the shutter location. Pretty much any other camera I have, the winder, the shutter is in the middle of it, whereas here it's separate, which is actually, it's kind of fine just because of the location. You have to go all the way over. It actually would be annoying to have your finger back here to take a picture. Like, that does feel a little bit weird, and having to come up here, move it. So it does feel correct in where it is, but it's just weird that it's by itself. It's just, I don't know, it's just different. And then as far as, I know I said that I love the viewfinder because it's bright and you can see the shutter speed on it, but things I don't like about it is that it's very cluttered. Both the 40mm and the 50mm lines are fixed on the inside of the viewfinder. I believe it has like a 90 as well lines, but those only appear if you put a 90mm lens on the camera. But whereas like the M6 changes according to which lens, so you only see the correct ones, those 40 and 50 are just always there. So that's kind of annoying if you're looking through. Also, 40 is the widest frame lines that are on this camera. So right now I'm shooting a 35mm lens, or maybe I want to shoot a 28mm lens. There isn't an option for frame lines for that in this camera. And so either you need to get a like auxiliary viewfinder to look up to the like mount up here, be able to see what it would look like. Or in the end, honestly, I just kind of guess and just like, because it does have a little bit of space outside of the 40. So I just kind of assume that's most of the viewable view when I have the 35 in, and the 28, I don't know. I don't use my 28 very much, so it's not a huge issue. Final viewer to verdict though, this camera is super awesome. Also, I was thinking it'd be really fun if they made a digital version of it. Leica did make a like CL line for a while, and I think they might have discontinued it, but it definitely was different than this. But the Minolta brand is owned by Sony now. So can you imagine if like Sony and Leica could get together and take a body like this and then put a modern sensor in it or something? That'd be pretty cool. Because I think this is smaller than like a Fuji X100 series camera. But put that with Leica lenses on it. I really like this camera. And for what I paid for it, it's gonna be really hard for me to consider selling it down the road. And what I'm really annoyed at is that I just didn't buy it sooner, because these things have existed, they're super cheap, and I waited for a really long time to save up for my M6. And I love that camera, and I'm really glad that I did. But I probably could have bought this thing many years sooner and gotten to know the Leica system, gotten to know the rangefinder system, and been using it for a long time before I made the jump all the way to the big sexy beast. Whereas if you want to take pictures, this will take great pictures and get you into the ecosystem a lot sooner. Anyway, if you ever use one, let me know what you think.